Hey there, Rohis. Welcome back to Droogipedia, your Python learning adventure. So you're feeling excited after conquering your first Python program in the last episode? Well, that's lekker, my bro, because now we get to level up your coding skills by diving into the world of variables and data types. So you might be wondering what parties have to do with coding. Well, imagine you're organizing a big pie and you need to keep track of who's bringing what. Variables are like that, but instead of keeping track of boerewors and chakalaka and pub, in Python they hold different types of data. So just like not everyone brings the same food to a braai, data comes in different flavors too. You will learn all about numbers like the number of guests at your braai, strings, maybe the names of all the dishes there, and even booleans, which are like tiny switches that can either be true or false, like whether you have enough braai coals or not. And guess what? You can do cool things with these amazing variables. Imagine you need to figure out how much meat to braai based on the number of guests. Well, I'll show you how to perform basic operations like addition and subtraction, all using your new variable friends. So grab your coding braai stand and get ready to learn. Because in this episode, we'll unpack the secrets of variables and data types, making you a Python pro biggie by biggie. And always remember, Rohis, to like. Okay, variables are kind of like magic boxes that store different types of information for your code, right? So, for example, imagine planning a braai. You wouldn't want to keep track of everything in your head, would you? So, you would have fields that store the type of meat that you're gonna buy, or the number of guests that will be coming to your event, or whether you have enough coal or no coal. So, to declare a variable in Python, you would simply give it a name. Say, for example, let's say number of guests. So, and we'll give it a number which is 10. So we know that we're going to be having 10 guests at our event. So that is a integer. If we wanted to declare the name of the venue, we'll say name, or let's just call it venue, and then let's call it Hip Hotel, right? So that is a string. A string, you store it inside quotation marks. If we wanted to keep track of whether the event has started or not, we can say started, and then would say false, so the event hasn't started yet. So anyway, in my code, whenever I type number of guests, it will say 10, or whenever I say started, it should give me false, right? So suppose in this case you want to plan a braai. Your friend has a birthday party and has asked you as a new Python developer to come up with a code that will determine whether they will be on budget or over budget. So for that, first of all, let's close this console here and head over to Workspace to create a file for it. So if you're on PyDroid, you can simply click on the top there in the top right hand corner and create a new file. And if you're here on Python Anywhere, simply go to Browse, Files, and head over to Workspaces. We created in episode 1. If you don't have it, you can go ahead and create a folder called Workspace. And in this, create a file called episode_2.py. Go ahead and create the new file. So I'll give you the parameters for the braai in just a short while. So the first line, you can just make it a comment that explains what's happening in here. Let's say episode 2 exercise, and then you can call it braai master. Right. So what are the parameters for this exercise? So suppose that you have 5,000 rand, that's your budget. So let's say budget is equals to 5,000. Now what is the next parameter? They say the number of guests. How many guests will be there? Number of guests. And suppose there will be 120 guests. This is a big bride. So now let's also say this is just the meat only. There won't be the salads and everything else. People will bring them along. So we know that you want to serve each guest at least 400 grams of meat, right? I don't know how big that is. So we'll call it meat per person, meat per guest is equals to 400, right? And let's do a comment here and say in grams, and then here let's just say in rands. So these are integers. We have defined a budget, which whenever we call on budget, it will be 5,000. We say number of guests, it will be 120. Meat per guest, it will be 400, and we know that is in grams. So what else? How 100 gram of meat. So we say meat cost is, let's say it's 60 rands. 60 rands. And say rands per kilogram. Let's just say per kilogram so that we can do some conversions, right? Sharp. And what else? We also know that each gram is 60, kilogram is 60, meat per guest is 400, number of guests is 120. So let's just say what is the event theme? Okay, maybe let's not say theme, but let's say the event name, so that we can have a string here. We'll call it Gia's party, Gia's braai. Gia's birthday braai. And let's do this and say integers, and let's do this and say this is a string, and then let's do this and say these are boolean fields. Boolean. So a boolean field would be whether they are over budget or under budget. So let's say on budget. For now, let's just say false. We don't know whether or not, so we can just assume that false, that they're not on budget, right? So this is a boolean. These are the different types of these are the different types of variables: integer, string, and boolean. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted. So let's get on to it now. The first thing that we would want to, let's start with a simple print and say print event name, and then add budget calculate. So I wanted to show you that I can define a string with double quotations or single quotations, right? So let's run it, and have run. We expect to just see a budget calculator for Gia's birthday party braai. And coming up shortly in a while now, we have Gia's birthday braai budget calculator, which is what we expected, right? Cool. So now let's quickly and very much quickly determine how much meat is required. So total meat is going to be the number of guests times meat per guest. So I'm just going to copy and paste. So you know that the total meat required is the number of guests times the meat per guest, right? So now let's just print total meat required, and then put and then say total meat, and then so another tip is to always, they call them PEP 38 standards, so you have to leave spaces after every comma, right? So total meat, and then I also want to add that it is in grams, so that we do not lose track of what's going on, right? Then we can go ahead and run it. Total meat required is 48,000 in grams. So let's just say 48,000. Let's put brackets here so that you can see brackets within quotation marks would be treated as strings that you want to be displayed. So here we go. We have total meat total meat required. Let's run it again. Total meat required is 48,000 grams. Now let's convert it into kilos. Let's say we can define another variable and say kilograms. Total meat kilograms is equals to total meat divided by 1,000, because 1 kilogram is equals to 1,000 grams. Let's quickly Google. Yes, there's 1,000 grams in a kilogram. Sharp. So now we can say, come on, whenever you're ready, however you want it, however you need it, however you want it. Alright. So now we can say print total meat required, and just say okay, let's do this, but for simplicity let's just keep it in a separate line. Total meat required, then we say total meat kilograms, and then we'd say kilograms. Consistency. Right, so let's run it. we expect to get 48 kilograms. So we know that the total meat required is 48 kilograms. Now look at how it has this point something here, and it doesn't have a point in the one above, right? So I'm going to do something also here and say print the type of total meat, and also next to it the type of total meat kilograms. So you can always use the function type to determine the type of a variable or a function in Python. So we know that the first one is an integer, which is the total meat per guest, total meat required, which was the number of guests times the meat per guest in grams, right? So the second one is called a float. A float is another type of number, but when it has comma something, that's a float number. So let's see, different types of numbers. And then now we are supposed to calculate how much it's gonna cost for the meat, right? So let's call it total cost is equals to total meat in kilograms times how much was the meat per kilogram, right? Meat cost times the cost of meat. So now here let's say calculate the gross total, and then I'm going to say print total cost, and then here we say the gross total is equals to total cost. So let's run it. Sorry. So we find that the total cost will be 2,880 just for meat, right? So now check if gross is on budget. Now how do we check if something is on budget? It is on budget if it is less or equals to that amount, right? So I am going to introduce you to an if statement, and this is what we'll be doing in the next episode. Conditionals, right? So we are going to say if total cost is less than or equals to the budget. What did we write here? Just the budget. If total cost is less than or equals to the budget, then when we hit enter, it creates an indent here. So we call it a tab. It's a space. You can do it with 4 space bars. Hit space bar 4 times. But when you're using this, it's automatically done for you, right? So one thing about indentation is that if you're using 4 space bars or if you're using a tab, you should be consistent in that script. Use the same form, either a tab or 4 spaces. So now we want to, let's say the person is on or under budget. Print on budget. Why do I keep forgetting the U? Now What if they are not on budget? Else. Right? So now we see that it is, let's go line by line. On lines 4 to 7, we are defining the integers. On line 10, it is the string. Line 13 is the on budget or not on budget, right? And which we haven't used yet, but I'll show you how we're going to use it. And then we go ahead and then we print the total meat required and the total meat required in kilograms. We also print the different types of numbers, like I just show you how to find out what type of something is the type of something. And we also calculate the gross total, and we also check if the gross is on budget or not on budget, right? So now here's what I'm gonna do. We are going to say if the person is on budget, we are going to change this variable on budget to true. It's equals to true. And then we say on budget, and then we, okay, let's not do this. Let's remove this. We're gonna do a single print out at the end so that we can use our on budget or not on budget, right? Good. So here we say the person is over budget, is not on budget, so we say false. Now on budget, and then let's say on budget. And I also want to remove these ones. Let's just comment them out. In fact, let's remove them all. They are not needed in this one. You've already seen how to determine them. So now let's do this. If the total cost is less than or equals to the budget, it will turn the budget to true, or else it will say on budget is equals to false. And at the end, it will print on budget, which will be true or false. So in this case, total gross total was 2,880, and therefore it was on budget, right? So now, suppose that each piece of meat costs 160 now. Now let's run it. And then we're expecting the person to be over budget. So are they on budget? No, they won't be on budget, right? Makes sense. Sharp. So go ahead and look at the code and play around as much as you want with it and figure out, play around with some of the values here. If you're on Pydroid, you can still use the same thing, the same code to figure it out. The code will also be made available on Droogipedia's GitHub page. Thank you for watching, and remember to like and subscribe and invite more people to try our